So we've got two sessions today. We're going to be starting out with the introductory session to Niagara, and then we've got one that follows straight after, which is a slightly more advanced session. The core concepts are still going to be fairly basic, so I don't want anything to be too mind-blowing. Also, I do only have half an hour for each session, so there's only so much that I can do. We're going to be mostly in Niagara for the presentation. So yeah, be warned, there may be some crashing, but it's been pretty stable for me throughout development, so I'm happy enough to actually try and do this presentation live. So I think we can get started. Awesome. Okay. So my name's Arran Langmead. For those of you who don't know me, I work for Epic Games. I joined in end of November as a developer relations technical artist, which just gets abbreviated to DevRel Tech Art because it's just a hideously long job title. So before that, I was a lecturer. So I'm pretty used to talking to people. And I do see that some of you are taking notes. Well done. You will be getting the extra credit at the end of this session. There will be a test. So the main thing I just want to cover in today's session is just an overview of the system, because it's quite a complicated looking system when you first start to use it. I kind of liken it to ZBrush in a lot of ways, where you open it up for the first time and you're just daunted by the amount of stuff that is there, right? And it kind of seemingly very easily breaks a lot of like ZBrush. So what I want to do is just kind of demystify some of this stuff, go over the setup and just the general processes of building a simple particle. And then in the advanced session, we'll go over creating, kind of our own modules and things like that. So, well, that worked really easily. So I've built a very simple particle here. It's just a very simple smoke particle. I chose smoke because it's kind of like the bread and butter of the particle world. At some point, you'll be building a smoke particle. Niagara is intended to be a good tool for not just, kind of the complex stuff, but also the simple stuff. It's more performant. It should be a good tool for use for all of your particle needs, not just, kind of when you need to build a really complex thing that Cascade can't do. So I'm going to go open up this particle. And I'm just going to oh no, collapse all. Why don't you work sometimes? So this is a system. This is kind of the closest thing that you can get to an actual, the actual Cascade. And now my right clicking's not working. Yay! So let's open up a particle system. I just want to create like a really basic one, nice and simple. So these are emitters, and you can think of this as an actual system itself, right? So this is probably the closest parallel that you're going to get. And what we've done is we've taken these emitters and we've made them as editable standalone components. And those go here, right? So you can add as many different ones as you like. Now, what's really great about this is that you can take each of these individual emitters and you can reuse them and you can edit them and you can timeline them as well. So you can actually have much greater control over when you want particular particles to start activating and when you want them to die. So these are our emitters. And what we also have within our system is access to those individual emitters. And because they're instances of those core emitters, they can be changed as well and edited, which means that you have a much greater control over the things that you're doing. So we're hoping that what will happen is you'll move to a much more componentized base of making all your particle effects. And that should hopefully improve production time or make you a bit quicker in moving as you go forward. So I'm going to close this and I'm going to open up the actual Niagara emitter. So this is where you'll be doing most of the kind of the base work for your particle creation. And what you'll see here on the right is all of the basically the keys and controls for our objects. You can see that they're nicely color-coded because we're artists and we like color coding. So just to start and quickly run through them, we have the orange at the top, which are emitter spawn and emitter update, and we have our particle spawn and our particle update. I just want to start with those key ones to start with. So when we look at emitter, we're actually looking at this at the emitter level, and this thing is controlling how many things are spawning. This is really, really useful because if you want to have a shared data set, that's where you create this object. You do that in the emitter spawn because you want to basically, at the start of this particle's lifetime, create a variable that all the particles have access to and all the particles share. So that's where you create that. And then if you want to update that variable over time, you would edit that in the emitter update. So while the emitter spawn only happens at the start, kind of like begin play if you're thinking of this in terms of blueprint, the emitter update is more like the event tick, right, which is updating constantly. But that thing is only happening once per emitter. Now we get down to the particle spawn. This is spawning every single particle. So this is controlling every single one. So at the start of every particle's lifetime, that's where you're getting particle spawn come in. So if you want to start off with a variable, this is where, if you're thinking in cascade terms, you'd have your initial variables that you set. So your initial velocity on the particle, the initial size that you want to be going in at. And then in particle update, this is the particles updating over time or over a set variable that we want. And then finally, we have the red tab at the bottom. So this is the render tab and just allows you to create the base types of particle that you want. So if we go to the plus button, you can see we have all of these sets here. So light, mesh, ribbon, and sprite. You can see that we've got rid of beam because it's basically a ribbon. I say basically, it's a ribbon. So, you know, just use those. So this thing is just using a sprite, so it only has that, but we can add multiples of that. So if we want to have a sprite component, but we also want to tie a light to that component, we can do that, and we can just add that in. So if we open up some of these tabs, you'll see that we have these gray sets here. These are called modules, right? And if we look at this as a cascade view, let's just open that up. That's what these kind of were. But what we've done is expose those and allowed you to create new ones. So every single one of these, maybe not these ones because they're just setting variables, but each of these elements we can actually go in and we can open up and adjust. So if we wanted to create a new module, we can just click on the tab here, open these, and then we can pick one that we want. So if we want to have it spawning as a sphere, let's say, let's just type in, if I can type on this keyboard, type in sphere location. Then we have a set sphere location. Suddenly our particles are spawning over that, and we've put that in the begin play, so or the particle spawn. So we know that that's a set variable that's starting with each time. And then if we open that, which we can do just by double-clicking on any one of these modules, we can see that actually the module component is based on this very blueprint-esque way of coding. So you can go through and you can see what basically all of these things are doing. And this is a really nice way of learning how your particles are actually built and how they can be edited. So a really good methodology when you're working is find a module that's kind of similar to the effect that you need, and then you can adjust it and you can make a new one based on that, copy it across, and then you can edit and adjust it as you need. But we won't be looking at those modules just yet. And then finally, at the bottom, we have the timeline, which just allows you to really set where you want these particles to spawn, how you want them to go, how you want them to kind of change over time. So I'm going to start off really simply just by taking you through making a very simple particle. So we've got our effects tab over here, and you can see that we've got a load of different objects that we can choose from. To start with, the only ones that you're actually going to need are Niagara emitter, Niagara system, and as you kind of progress on, Niagara module. So I'm going to make a new emitter, and you'll see that we've got this really handy tab So this again is kind of part of that componentized base that we're trying to work from. We've got a few presets that you can choose from. So if you have a general directionality or if you have a general flow that you want the particles to go in, you can just choose one of these. You can also copy existing ones from your project. So if you've actually built a particle emitter that's already quite similar, you can just say, okay, I just want to grab that and that's my base. And then you can start editing and working in that as you go. You can also create an empty one, which just has nothing in it. And that's what I'm going to do to start with. So I'm just going to click on this, open it up. And you can see we've got this blank template, right? So we can start putting in it, but nothing's happening. Our timeline is kind of freaking out a little bit. It's like jittering. And we've got basically nothing to do. So I want to start adding some stuff in. So I'm going to start by adding a component to my render. I want to choose the kind of thing that I want to actually be building. In this instance, I'm going to choose my sprite renderer. We have a load of options here inside sprite rendering, so we can choose our material as standard. I'm going to choose the little duck that I made. We can choose alignment and facing, so this is really useful if you want to have particular directionality, whether it's going through velocity or whether it's going through a custom vector that you actually write as your own module. We also have the pivot in UV space, which is insanely useful. If you don't know about the pivot offset, then yeah, you're welcome, because it's right here, and use it. You can also choose sub-images and also bindings as well. So one of the other really useful things about Niagara is that you can tie different particles to other particles. So if you want your size to be directly related to your lifetime, you can just tie those particles together. And you can do this both in binding and at the top as well. And then to get started, we actually need to start spawning some particles, right? So we do this at the emitter level because our emitter needs to control what is actually spawning. So I'm going to just type in spawn, and I just want spawn rate as a standard spawn rate. Now, we get this warning, right? And this is one of the things that I actually really, really love about Niagara. It seems like a really weird thing. It's like, I just want to spawn something. Why can't you just spawn it? And the reason for that is because there may be instances where you don't want this thing, right? So you want to have a spawn rate, but you want to control it by other means. So at the moment, it's saying the following's predependency is not met, emitter life cycle, right? And basically what that's saying is you need to have this other module if you want this thing to work. But it doesn't just make that for you, because you might want to actually build your own version of the emitter lifecycle. You may want to have your own controls over that. In which case, we have a dismiss issue. So you can basically say it, and there's a little in brackets, I know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm just going to press fix issue. And what that will do is it will just create that module that's needed for you. So in most instances, it will know whether things are in the wrong, and will tell you about that, and then you can add those components as you need. So at the moment, I've got an emitter lifecycle, and that's set up a load of objects here. And at this point, I just want to quickly touch on the parameters tab. Normally, I kind of shove that over here just to free up a little bit more space in my viewport. The parameters tab holds all of the tab information. And you can see that all of these variables here have actually been created by the module. So we've got all of this data that we're starting to add to our objects. At the moment, we have nothing in particles, so this is empty because we haven't actually set anything. We haven't created any particle specific variables. So I've got my emitter, my spawn rate set to 0. I'm just going to set that to 10 for now, just so we can actually see, hey, our little duck, it's alive. So we have our object, and we can see something, but it's not really doing anything. So at this point, we want to start doing some stuff. So I've got my particle spawn, and what we've made is just a base module called initialize. So if I just open this up, and do initialize particle. An initialized particle is just a collection of variables to set, which we generally find that you're probably going to want for your object. So we probably think you're going to want lifetime and color and things like that. Now, again, this is just another module, so you can go and create your own ones of these. If you're you know, kind of the art style that you're working on has a load of predefined things that you know that you need for almost all of your particles, you can create this module for yourself that kind of does your own version of your initialization and sets all of these values. So we have our object. I'm going to set something else as well. I'm going to add some velocity to our duck because I just want to throw the thing off in a direction. So I'm just going to add velocity. And you can see we've got another one of those warnings come up. So if we just have a look at it, it's going, the following post-dependency is not met, solve forces and velocity. And basically what it's saying there is you've asked me to apply a force, but you haven't actually got anything to control that force and have it set. So if I press fix, we have our solve forces and velocity. And you can see that that gets added to the particle update. So this is something that is happening constantly throughout the particle's lifetime, rather than just initially at the start. And if I click on this and add 100, yay, my duck gets thrown into the air. I'm sure it will land safely on the ground. But at the moment, all the particles are spawning at exactly the same velocity every single time. And I don't want that. I want to have a bit of variation and change in my particle. So each of these variables here can be changed. So you can have them originate from a single source. So at the moment, this is a vector, and it will stay as a vector. So if I go to my particles, you can see I've got it here, particles.velocity. That's the variable that's been set. But if I wanted to, I could say, actually, I just want this to be a float value. So if I type in float, I can do a vector from float. And what that will do is it will basically just clamp that variable down to a single float value, and that float value will just be input into both x, y, and z. And you can do this for pretty much any variable. You can kind of just say, actually, I just want you to go from a color or from a single value or a set value. I don't actually want this, so I'm going to get rid of it. We have a little yellow tab, which is our reset tab. You'll have seen this throughout the engine. If you press this, it will just take you back to what the original value is. So what I want is a range of vectors. So to do that, I'm just going to click on this tab here, and I'm just going to type in range and go for uniform ranged vector. This gives you a minimum and a maximum value that you can choose, so your velocity can go anywhere within those two ranges. So for this one, I'm just going to set 100 and 50, 30 maybe instead. And in fact, it would help if those were the other way around. And then I get some nice variation and some nice range. And then to finally just finish off this one, I just want to add a little bit of gravity. So I'm just going to add a gravity force. And you can see I've got another error that's come up again. But it's the same error as the last one. It's saying that you haven't got to solve forces and velocity. And this is actually wrong, because I do have a solve forces and velocity. So what I need to do, instead of fixing this issue, which will just create another solve forces and velocity, I just need to move it in the sort order, because my gravity needs to come first, and then my solve forces needs to come afterwards. And that gives me very simple particle setup and movement. So let's get this into the scene. Just save that out. So if I drag this out, you can see that actually I can't do anything with it. And that's because you can't just put emitters into the scene. It's kind of like trying to put a texture into the scene. It needs to have a material. So in this instance, we need to create a system from that. You can do this either by creating the system and then adding it manually, or if you just want to create it based off that particle, you can just create Niagara system. And then once we have this system, we'll have the exact same thing, except we can add multiples. So let's say that we want to have another set of ducks falling on our system here. So I can add this same system again, but this time I want to change the ducks. So this one's actually coming in at a different direction, maybe spawning in at a different time. I can go down, find my velocity, open that up, and I can change the direction of that. So let's set that to -30 and -100. And now I have my ducks spawning at a different time. Let's offset that as well. So you can see we start off with it spawning in one direction, and then it moves over to the other. Yay, ducks. Let's take a look at something a little bit prettier, though I do like the ducks. So this is a very simple smoke particle. Again, there's nothing in here that you couldn't do in Cascade, but it's still important to learn so that you can kind of transfer this stuff over. So I have my particle effect here. I've got a load of variables that I'm setting. So if we start off with our emitter spawn and update, you can see that all I'm doing here is I'm just setting the spawn rate and the emitter life cycle. So that's just setting those particles to actually be created. Then I set a load of variables. So I'm going through setting a base velocity, setting a base sprite rotation, which gives me that initial random location offset, setting a size, which again I'm setting as a range. And again, this one is a vector, which you can see vector 2D from float, so it tells you what it's been converted from. And then I'm setting that to a uniform range. So I'm basically going, I just want this to be uniform, so these three vectors to all be the same, but I want that float to be a range that I'm actually getting that from. I'm then giving it a lifetime, so I'm telling it basically I want it to die after a certain period of time, which I didn't tell my ducks because I just couldn't bring myself to set them to die at a particular time. And then I have a sub-image index. So this texture is based on a series of images. So if I just hide these, I've got these kind of sets of slightly different particles as a flipbook, which again, I'm setting just down here under sub-UV. So I'm just setting the size of that. And then setting a target rotation rate. So this one's really important because initially you might think that your target rotation rate needs to be in the update because you want that to be updating over time. In this instance, that's not the case because if I set a random float for my rotation rate, what that will do is it will pick a random rotation rate every single frame. So what you'll find is you'll get the thing jittering over time. So what I need to do at the start of the particle's lifetime is set that variable and basically say this is what my target rotation rate is, which I set. And then when I actually do my sprite rotation rate, I can set that particle to be the target. So it goes, I need to pick a random rotation rate, say 30. It picks that at the start, and then it just references that. So it's rotating at a constant amount. I have my solve forces velocity, my update age. I've set my sprite rotation. And then I have size scale. So we have curves as well that you can set, which change over normalized age. What's really cool about this is that you can change these to any variables you want. So if you actually don't want it to be based on age, but based on something else, you can change it and just swap it out to be a different variable that you can then control and edit. And then finally, color. Just setting it the translucency to start invisible and then slowly get more visible and then fall off over time. Then finally I have my dynamic material parameter, which just basically just warps the base texture inside the material, which I can just show you quickly. So this is my parameter. I'm multiplying it by just a very simple noise and feeding that into the texture coordinates. That's really useful if you just want to have a nice simple amount of warping. So you can see that actually as, I'll just zoom in so you can see that particle. We start out as quite uniform and fluffy, and then over time it starts to get a little bit more kind of dispersed and warped, which gives you a nice end result. And finally, the last thing I just want to touch on with this is the system. So the blue tab gets created when you're working at a system level. And this is really useful if you want to share values across multiple emitters. So if I have multiple types of smoke, I can create a variable in here which is shared across all those variables, and then I can tie those variables back in. So this is useful if you ever want to have something shared across the emitter. It's also where you would create exposed values as well. So if you want to have something that you can tie to your object, then you can do that in here. So if you want to create a parameter that's set by a blueprint, or if you want to set that manually, that's where you would go through and do that. And then all of that can then be referenced again inside here. So that's it for the introduction. Thank you very much for coming. I hope this was useful.